And it's funny
Hmm.
because I talk to a lot of parents, and they are extremely worried about children backtracking, especially in their education over the summer. Like you're talking about
Yeah.
now, and taking a break and taking a breather. The hardest thing is to convince parents that not only in the macro year do children need a breather and spend time outdoors and do other things, but I just think in the day to day realm they need to do that. Do you find that you have to deal a lot with children sliding backwards and then catching them up, and how does that affect the way you teach math?
No, I think it's good to be able to have a huge out breath in the summer. That does also put a little bit more, you could say, a little bit more of a burden on the parents because we have these long vacations. You need to figure out what to do with your kids to have
Mm-hmm.
them, have some good, meaningful activities. But be it some sort of summer camp and or something, just for them to have a little bit of a different change of pace is good. And do they slide back over the summer? Do they forget the math that they learned? Of course they do. But as a Waldorf educator, I say that's okay. I'm fond of saying this idea that forgetting is part of learning. I
Yes,
used to
it
have this.
is.
I used to have this strange idea in my head that if I were successful as a teacher, then I could give a lesson to my students, perhaps an entire unit or particular topic over the course of several days, and if I did it well, that the students would learn it well, it would be testable, and they would never forget it. And I've come to really realize that that's so unreasonable. I mean, even for the brightest kids, it just doesn't make sense, right? That forgetting is part of learning. It's an interesting thing to learn something permanently. Permanently maybe is not exactly the right word, but to get to the point where you have mastery, you need to forget it 3 times and bring it back into your head. And so I don't know what the topic could be. You could choose it, but let's just imagine a math topic where, as a teacher, this is a topic that is important, that we want them to know this particular topic and have particular skills associated with it well into the future. Take fractions, for example. So they learned fractions in fourth grade. It seemed that they were kind of getting the idea and doing okay with it. And now here we are after the summer going into fifth grade, and many teachers would be kind of concerned if they, then quizzed their class and say, well, remember this from last year? I mean, maybe you had that particular class last year, or maybe you didn't. If you're a homeschool parent, maybe you remember quite well doing this lesson with your child, and you're just horrified that they've seemed to have forgotten all of it. And I remember being a teacher, and I think it was an eighth grade class. I taught them in seventh grade. I remember this class, and let's just imagine that it was percents or something. And I had taught them percents in seventh grade, and I probably began it in sixth grade. And so here am I in eighth grade, and I said, okay, now we're going to start our percents unit for eighth grade, and put a and basically said, do you remember this? And they all said, no, what are you talking about? I don't even remember what a percent is. And I just remember feeling this sense of deflation. I was just so depressed about it. Oh no, these kids! I must not be a good teacher. They haven't remembered what I taught them. And then of course they liked me as a teacher, and they saw that, and they thought, oh, I must not be a very good student either. And I came to realize, you know what? I finally realized it's okay. And suddenly, so then in the future, I had a very different reaction to that situation, and instead said, yeah, of course you've forgotten it, right? That's normal. It's part of learning. And the students didn't feel bad about it either. And then within a few minutes, they're like, oh yeah, I kind of remember this now. And maybe they do a couple practice problems, and within a couple of days they're right back to where they were, and then you can kind of build over on that. And that was a helpful thing to me when I realized, forgetting is part of learning. To remember something, to really get to the point where you know something, you need to forget it 3 times. And that's true with something like fractions, maybe even more than 3 times with fractions in particular. It's true.
Yeah, that
Yeah.
happens a lot with me as well. Are you familiar with the concept of a Lightner box?
No, what is it?
So it's a cool way of learning. I'm a bit of a linguist. I speak three languages, and I had to learn a fourth one as an adult. I learned three as a child, and it's a little bit easier to learn languages when your brain plasticity is open to languages.
That's
As an
very true.
adult, oh, we have prejudices, so I had to learn French more than conversationally. Now, light in your box is you could take anything that you need to memorize, and the concept is forget to learn. And what you're actually strengthening isn't your ability to memorize things, but your ability to recall things. So you
Yes.
would take something like vocabulary words or math facts, or could be the bones in the body, could be anything. You group them into this box and you simply flash them. And did I get that? If I got it, I put it in the back of the box. If I didn't get it, it goes to the front of the box and it's reviewed every 3 days. So you are pausing. You're not trying to memorize everything every day. You're taking the things that you know and saying, okay, I'm going to be able to recall that, and pushing it out into the future. And then you're taking the things you need to memorize or the things you need more work on and working on them every 3 days or so. And so that's the concept of a lightning box. And it was very useful to me to always think, well, I need to forget in order to learn.
Yeah.
So it's the same exact thing you're saying. It's so insightful, and it's good for parents to understand that there are modalities to help, but it's even better if they just relax and realize that it's everyone catches up. All these
Yeah, that's such an interesting thing you shared because I also have, I would not refer to myself as a linguist, but I've had to learn two other languages other than English, and both of them in my adult life. And it was harder as you got older, for sure. But I did a very similar thing with flashcards, a very similar system to what you just described. And it's also the
flashcards are good.
same sort of recommendation that I give to parents for their children to learn their multiplication facts. Now, I don't say to begin with the flashcards. There's a whole nother, I won't go down that road too far, but if it gets to the point, usually by the end of fourth grade, I hope that they can learn their arithmetic facts in third grade. That's kind of the high level goal, is by the end of third grade. And then, of course, in fourth grade, we're having to review that, et cetera. And then flashcards may be helpful towards the end of the fourth grade for a lot of children. But if you are going to do flashcards, I've often said, doing it once a week just isn't going to do it. It's something you gotta isolate those ones that you need to work on, and it's what you referred to with that box. Some go in the back, some go in the front. These are the ones we need to work on, and if you do that in a systematic way, that can really be helpful. But it's certainly harder the older you get. There's that window of opportunity in mathematics for the memory. I mean, third graders are extraordinary in their ability to remember things. It's just amazing. It's amazing how the brain changes in its capacities over the years. And you mentioned just, for to learn a new language when you're 5 years old. We had that experience when we did move to Holland, and my daughter was 5. Astounding how she just soaked it all in with no effort and learned the language, as opposed to her old father, who I was having to study so hard, use flashcards, have tutors, all of that, right? And so our brains were working very differently. And then, of course, in third grade, that ability to really learn things by heart, to memorize, is really, and in third grade is the time to do that sort of thing. And then, there are other things that end up, I often comment on a student's ability or their growth in terms of thinking mathematically, logically, all of that kind of higher level mathematical thinking. It's astounding how much that develops, that incredible growth in the way that a 2 or a 4-year old is learning language. Well, the way that an 8th grader or a 9th grader, between 8th and 10th grade, that ability to learn to really think mathematically at a higher level is astounding. The difference between somebody entering 8th grade and then, say 2 years later, what their ability is, it's extraordinary. So it's always fascinating to see how the brain develops in certain ways at a later time.